Ashes Know Your Name, Part 5. Ashes Never Lie. Description. As decades of lies finally unravel, Black Hollow is forced to confront the truth it buried beneath fear, greed, and rumor. Jonah must choose between revenge and redemption while Keller faces the guilt that has haunted him since childhood. In a final reckoning that changes the town forever, old enemies find unexpected forgiveness, hidden conspiracies are brought into the light, and the rumors that once destroyed lives are replaced by the truth. But some scars never disappear, they simply remind us that there are always two sides to every story. Ashes Know Your Name, Part 5. Ashes Never Lie. Alternate ending. Ashes never lie. The first rumor reached Jonah before the sun did. They're saying Keller Mercer killed Sheriff Bennett. He stopped in the middle of Main Street. The words floated from the open doorway of May's Diner, spoken with the same certainty as if someone had witnessed it with their own eyes. Rumors had always been faster than truth in Black Hollow. Today would be different. The courthouse steps were packed shoulder to shoulder. Deputies lined the entrance while television cameras pointed toward the podium where Sheriff Nora Bennett stood with a thick folder tucked beneath her arm. Jonah remained near the back of the crowd. Not because he was afraid. Because he knew exactly how these people looked at him. Some remembered him as the boy who let his sister die. Others remembered him as the man accused of murder. None of them remembered the truth. Keller stood beside Nora, his face still bruised from the fight they'd had days earlier. The rivalry that had defined half their lives hadn't disappeared. It had simply become less important than what they had uncovered together. Nora stepped to the microphone. For 20 years, she began, this town has lived on stories. A murmur swept through the crowd. Some stories were true. She opened the folder. Most were lies. Inside were copies of ledgers, photographs, witness statements, and the journal Thomas Mercer had left behind. One by one, she read the names of officials who had hidden evidence after the fire, not to protect a child, but to protect themselves from a land fraud scheme tied to Greystone Mine. They had staged deaths, buried records, threatened witnesses, and let innocent people carry the blame. Every lie demanded another. Every rumor buried another truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd as familiar family names echoed across the square. An elderly man removed his cap and lowered his head. A woman burst into tears. Someone whispered, "My God." Then Nora looked toward Jonah. "I owe this man an apology." The words stunned the square into silence. "I grew up believing Jonah Mercer was responsible for tragedy." She paused. "I was wrong." She turned another page. The investigation proved Jonah Mercer never caused the fire that took his sister. Jonah felt the weight he'd carried for 2 decades begin to crack. Not disappear. Some wounds never did. But crack. Nora continued. He spent 20 years paying for a crime he never committed because the truth was easier to bury than the people who buried it. Nobody spoke. Not even the reporters. Keller stepped forward. "I've got something to say." He didn't use the microphone. He didn't need to. "I hated Jonah." He laughed bitterly. "I convinced myself he ruined my life." His eyes found Jonah's across the crowd. "The truth is, I let my guilt become hatred because hatred was easier to carry." He swallowed. "I should have stood beside my friend. Instead, I let him stand alone." Jonah looked away. He wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. Very tired. After a long moment, he walked through the crowd until he stood beside Keller. Neither man spoke. Then Jonah extended his hand. "You were an asshole." A few nervous laughs escaped the crowd. Keller smiled through wet eyes. "So were you." They shook hands. Not because 20 years could be erased. Because both men were finally willing to stop carrying them. The courthouse emptied slowly. Reporters chased headlines. Families argued. Old friendships shattered. Others quietly began again. Jonah wandered toward the cemetery as evening settled over Black Hollow. He stopped before a small headstone. Ellie Mercer, he knelt, brushing leaves from the stone. "I'm sorry it took so long." Wind rustled through the trees. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was talking to a ghost. He felt like he was talking to his sister. Across town, workers painted over the word murderer on Jonah's garage. A little boy watched from his bicycle. "Mom?" "Yeah?" "Was that man really bad?" His mother looked toward Jonah's house. She thought for a long time before answering. "No. I think people just kept telling the wrong story." The next morning, May's diner filled with its usual crowd. Coffee steamed. Plates clattered. Conversations drifted from booth to booth. An old man leaned close to another. "You hear the rumor?" His friend smirked. "What rumor's that?" The old man glanced out the window where Jonah and Keller were repairing a fence together, still arguing over whose measurements were wrong. "They say those two finally buried the hatchet." His friend chuckled. "About damn time." The old man smiled into his coffee. "No." He watched the sunrise spill across Black Hollow. "About 20 years too late." Outside, Jonah looked toward the mountains one last time. The scars remained. The memories remained. But the lies no longer owned his name. And as the town slowly learned the difference between rumor and truth, Black Hollow discovered something its people had forgotten long ago. There are always two sides to every story. Only one survives when the ashes finally settle. End of Part 5. End of Ashes. Know your name.